An old man lies on a bed of woven goat hair in a sun-baked Egyptian room. The air is heavy with the smell of myrrh. At the Hebrew roots, behind what they were called. At the bitter, heartbreaking rivalries that birthed them. At what actually happens. He increases their borders by bringing them into the safety of Goshen. The son of Adding becomes the savior of them all. Rachel was right to give him that name. God was not finished. She asked the heavens to, Yasaf, to add one more child to her arms. And heaven hears her. God will give Rachel exactly what she asked for. He will add one more son to her tent. But the arrival of that final boy will require a devastating exchange. In the ancient Near East, naming a child is not a ceremonial afterthought. It is a legal declaration. It sets a trajectory. It assigns a destiny. Rachel goes into labor on the harsh road to Bethlehem. The caravan stops. The delivery is brutal. The midwives panic. The blood stains the dust. Rachel's breathing slows. As her soul departs, she looks at the infant. She whispers a name with her final breath. Genesis 35 records her choice. She names him Ben-Oni, son of my sorrow. She names him after her agony. She names him after her death. But Jacob steps in. He hears the name. He overrules the dying breath of the only woman he ever truly loved. He looks at the child. He changes the declaration. He calls him Benjamin. The Hebrew word is Benyamin. Ben means son. Yamin means right hand. The root word Yamin appears heavily across the Hebrew scriptures. To each bloodline, you start to see a blueprint the historical reading completely misses. The names are not labels. It is not just a direction. The right hand is the seat of authority. It is the position of favor. It is the hand that grips the sword. Jacob's intervention changes everything. He refuses to let the boy wear his mother's tragedy. He refuses to let grief have the final word over the final son. Benjamin is not the son of what was lost. He is the son of what will conquer. And the tribe of Benjamin becomes exactly that. They become the fiercest military tacticians in Israel's history. They are the infamous left-handed slingers of Judges 20 who never miss a hair. They provide Israel's first monarch. King Saul, centuries later, another Saul from the tribe of Benjamin will take the Roman road to Damascus, encounter the risen Christ, and rewrite the theology of the Gentile world. The tribe of the right hand fights, but the renaming is also a shadow of a larger pattern. Look at Psalm 110. The Lord says to the Messiah, "Sit at my right hand." Look at the book of Acts. The skies open, and Stephen sees the crucified Christ standing at the right hand of God. God specializes in this exact reversal. He takes the man of sorrows, the one acquainted with grief, and he elevates him to the seat of ultimate cosmic authority. The name is not a mere title. It is a resurrection. Benjamin survives the dust of Bethlehem. He grows up. They are desperate prayers. They are weapons forged by broken women fighting for a husband's attention. The real question of these 12 names, the 12 brothers, are finally complete. The roster is set, but their ultimate destinations are not locked in yet, because decades later, an old man in an Egyptian bedroom is about to close his eyes. And before he does, he will summon these 12 men to his bed to tell them exactly what their bloodlines have purchased. The Egyptian sun dips below the horizon, casting long, sharp shadows across the plastered walls of the bedroom. Jacob's breathing is shallow, rattling faintly in his chest. The smell of medicinal oils and crushed herbs hangs heavy in the still air. The 12 men stand shoulder to shoulder around the bed, waiting. Genesis chapter 49 records the final moments of this patriarch's life. He summons his sons to his bedside, but he is not preparing a standard inheritance. He is not dividing flocks of sheep or parcels of silver. He is assigning their destinies. And as he speaks to them, one by one, a terrifying theological reality begins to take shape in the room. Jacob does not pull these prophecies out of thin air. He reaches back into the timeline of their lives, grabs the defining actions of their youth, and projects them forward into the history of their descendants. He looks at Reuben, the firstborn, the one who should carry the double portion, isn't just who they were. It's this. What does God do with the children of our dysfunction? These 12 brothers are the foundation. But Jacob remembers the night Reuben climbed into Bilhah's bed to assert his own dominance. The old man's voice cracks in the quiet room, as he declares that Reuben is unstable as water and he will not excel. The prophecy holds. Over the next 1,000 years of biblical history, the tribe of Reuben never produces a major prophet. They never produce a judge. They never place a king on the throne. They simply fade into the eastern pastures, swallowed by history. He turns to Simeon and Levi. He looks at the 2 brothers who took their swords and massacred the entire city of Shechem in a blind rage of vengeance. Jacob does not bless them. He curses their anger. He looks at the 2 men whose hands were stained with blood and declares, "I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." The words land like heavy stones on the floor. This chapter is not a crystal ball. It is a mirror. The text is demonstrating that destiny is not some arbitrary lightning bolt thrown from the clouds. It is the long, unavoidable tale of our own character. The actions you take in the quiet anonymity of your tent eventually become the borders of your future. But the genius of God's redemptive architecture hides right here in the shadows of this deathbed. Take the curse of Levi, of the biblical story. Yet, they are born into a family system so toxic it would shatter anyone. There is favoritism. There is betrayal. Jacob says, the descendants of Levi will be scattered across the land, fractured and divided. And they are. When Joshua partitions the promised land centuries later, the tribe of Levi receives no contiguous territory. They are scattered into 48 isolated cities. But the context of that scattering changes entirely. Because in the wilderness at Mount Sinai, when the golden calf is built and the nation rebels, it is the sons of Levi who draw their swords and stand on the side of God. And because of that loyalty, God takes the curse of their scattering and flips it. They are still scattered, but now they are scattered as priests. They are distributed throughout the nation so that every other tribe has access to the law, to the altar, and to the presence of Yahweh. The punishment of their past becomes the priesthood of their future. Jacob finally stops speaking. He draws his feet up into the bed. He breathes his last. The brothers weep in the Egyptian heat. They think the story of their names has been finalized here in the dust. They have no idea what is waiting for them at the very end of the Bible. Fast forward 2,000 years. An exile sits on an island. The salt wind of the Aegean Sea stings his eyes. There is human trafficking. There is a father who refuses to love evenly. And yet, God takes this exact mess. These specific 12, the waves of Patmos crash against the rocks. John is holding a pen, and he is writing the final chapters of the human story. He is recording the book of Revelation. He looks up. The sky rips open. A city descends. It shines with the glory of God. Its brilliance burns like a very rare jewel. It flashes like clear, blinding jasper. John describes the architecture of the New Jerusalem. He notes the foundations. He measures the walls. And then he looks at the entrances. Revelation chapter 21. Verse 12 gives us the precise blueprint. It has a great, high wall. It has 12 gates. Look closely at those gates. Look at what is inscribed on the heavy, solid pearl of the entrances to eternity. What does God carve into the doorways of his final kingdom? Is it the names of archangels? Is it a list of moral virtues? Is it the names of flawless, untainted saints who never compromised? Read the verse. Written on the gates are the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel. Think about the devastating weight of that detail. Think about the men we just watched, in the dirt of Genesis. Reuben slept with his father's concubine. Simeon and Levi massacred a city in cold blood. Judah suggested selling his own brother into slavery for 20 pieces of silver. Dan eventually introduced organized idolatry to the northern kingdom. These were the children of a bitter and weaves them into the very architecture of his kingdom. Every single one of these men carries a destiny encoded in the syllables of his name, polygamous proxy war. They were born from jealousy. They were shaped by profound, generational dysfunction. They shattered their own family. These are not the resumes of saints. These are the rap sheets of criminals. And yet, God takes their names. He traces the syllables of their broken identities. He carves, tech them into the pearl. He mounts them on the towering hinges of the new creation. The names are not monuments to human perfection. They are testaments to divine redemption. God refuses to erase their history. He does not whitewash their origins. He takes the exact names given in the heat of a domestic rivalry, the names born from Leah's weeping and Rachel's jealousy, and he permanently attaches them to the house of God. If you want to walk into the eternal city, you do not walk through a gate named perfection. You do not walk through a gate named purity. You walk through a gate named after a man who failed, who fractured, and who needed the blood of a lamb just as desperately as you do. The physical architecture of heaven is literally built on the reality of grace. But seeing the blueprint of this city is one thing. Living in the tension of your own broken timeline is another. But maybe the part of this entire history that stays with me most is not the sheer scale of that heavenly city. To feel the weight of what happens to them, you have to trace the bloodlines back to the beginning. It is the agonizing, deeply human dirt those names were dragged through before they ever reached the gates. I keep coming back to Leah, sitting alone in a tent she shares with a man who does not want her, holding a newborn baby she hopes will finally fix her fractured marriage. I look at Jacob, a grieving old man, overriding the dying breath of his favorite wife to pull his final son out of a destiny of sorrow. I see real people trying to build a life out of broken pieces, weaponizing what little they have just to survive the night. We look at our own dysfunction and assume it disqualifies us from the architecture of God. We think grace is a clean slate, handed only to those who have never stained the first one. The kingdom of God is not an exhibition of the untainted. It is a masterpiece built from the salvaged. If you are in a season where your own history feels too heavy to carry, you need to look at these 12 men. If the dysfunction of your family tree or the quiet, haunting memory of your own worst decisions, you have to step out of the deathbed chamber in Egypt and travel back to the dirt of Mesopotamia, seems to permanently dictate your future. You need to see what God actually does with ruined things. You might be carrying the heavy, physical ache of rejection in your chest, bargaining with God, the way Leah bargained with her fertility. You might be staring at a scattering in your own life, a lost job, a shattered relationship, a forced exile feeling exactly like Levi after the sword fell. You might feel the dry dust of your own Bethlehem in your mouth, convinced you are permanently marked as a child of sorrow. God does not ask you to sanitize your past before you approach Him. He asks you to bring the exact messy, unresolved reality of your current tent and place it in His hands. He takes the scattering of Levi and turns it into a priesthood. He takes the sorrow of Benjamin and seats it at His right hand. He takes Leah's desperate, manipulative, grasping for affection, and transforms it into the lineage of the Messiah. He does not throw away the clay because it is misshapen. He puts His thumbs directly into the deepest grooves of the damage and begins to mold it into a doorway. Your failures do not erase your name, because the destiny of the 12 tribes does not start with a divine decree from the clouds. It starts in a tent divided by jealousy. Your scattering does not cancel your gate. The story of the tribes is the story of a God who refuses to waste a single tear of human suffering. And when you finally step back and look at how He threads all of these broken bloodlines together across the centuries, you realize He has been writing one single, massive signature across the entire text from the very beginning. Look back at the long, dusty road from Mesopotamia to the island of Patmos. Look at what God actually accomplished with the children of this dysfunction. An unloved wife wept in the darkness of a divided tent, and the first stones of God's nation were laid. She finally stopped bargaining and threw her empty hands up in praise, and the lineage of the Messiah was born. 2 sisters traded human lives in a bitter proxy war, and the tribes of the covenant multiplied. A barren woman held a son and asked the heavens to add, and that boy saved the known world from starvation. A dying mother named her final breath after her agonizing sorrow, and a father raised that child to the seat of the right hand. Angry brothers massacred a city and earned a bitter curse, and God flipped their scattering into a holy priesthood. And the ragged, shallow breath of a long dying. Around his bed stand 12 men. They are not boys anymore. It starts with a thick wedding veil, a dark night, and a man waking up next to a woman he never wanted. 12 deeply broken men stood around an Egyptian deathbed, and their names were carved into the solid pearl of eternity. 12 men, 12 gates. One unshakable grace. But here is the part I keep coming back to. The gates of the New Jerusalem are not just a historical monument. They are an invitation. They are the permanent, physical proof that God does not require your perfection before he begins his work. He takes the raw, bleeding material of our real lives, the jealousy, the striving, the grief, the spectacular failures, and he builds his kingdom right in the middle of the mess. If you are in a season where you are staring at the wreckage of your own decisions, or carrying the heavy weight of a family history you cannot fix, stop trying to sanitize your past. Bring it to the God of Jacob. The kingdom does not ask you to hide your scars. It asks you to let them be redeemed. And may the God who has never once been, you afraid of your dysfunction, walk with you through the ruins of your own tent and build something eternal out of the pieces you thought were useless. When we examine the biblical narrative of Israel's origins, we are not looking at a romanticized portrait of faith. We are looking at a psychological survival game. We are analyzing a household built on the sharp, jagged foundation of a husband's blatant favoritism. The text is uncomfortably honest about the dynamic between Jacob and his two wives, Leah and Rachel. Jacob loved Rachel. He endured Leah. And in the ancient Near East, an unloved wife possessed only one currency, only one method to secure her position, and perhaps, finally, win the affection she was starving for. She had to produce heirs. The first 3 tribes of Israel are born from this exact desperation. Notice the progression of Leah's grief recorded in the Hebrew text. When she gives birth to her firstborn, she names him Reuben, old Reuven. In Hebrew, it literally translates to behold, Esson, but her reasoning exposes the bleeding wound at the center of her life. She says she chose this name because the Lord has looked upon her affliction, and surely now, her husband will love her. It is a visual plea. She is holding up a screaming, flesh and blood child as a human shield against her own invisibility. She is hoping that the sheer utility of providing an heir, they are shepherds, murderers, exiles, and princes. You can hear the nervous shifting of their leather sandals on the cold stone floor, will magically generate the romance she has been denied. But the heavy silence of Jacob's indifference remains. The coldness does not thaw, so she conceives again. And the strategy shifts from the eyes to the ears. She names her second son Simeon, Shimon. It comes from the Hebrew root shama, which means to hear or to listen. Leah says she gives him this name because the Lord heard that she was unloved. The first son was about her husband seeing her value. The second son is an acknowledgement that the walls of her tent are thin, and heaven has heard the sound of her weeping in the dark. Still, Jacob remains emotionally chained to Rachel. So Leah tries a third time. She gives birth to a third son and names him Levi. The name comes from the root lava, which means to join, to interlace, to twist together like vines. Leah says, "Now this time my husband will be joined to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." It is the most heartbreaking of the 3. It is a desperate grasp for physical and emotional proximity, a hope that this third child will finally be the heavy anchor that ties Jacob's wandering heart to her own. But it fails. The strategy of using children to purchase love never works. The first stones of God's nation were not laid in triumph. They were laid in the agonizing ache of a rejected woman. Jacob is about to speak. He looks at his sons, one by one, and he begins to pull the curtain back on the future. The foundation of the 12 tribes is built upon a mother weaponizing her womb to win a war she was destined to lose. Leah exhausts her options. She runs out of bargaining chips. She hits the absolute bottom of her emotional reserves, staring at 3 sons who have not fixed her fractured marriage. But the detail that changes the trajectory of history is what happens next. Because Leah gets pregnant a 4th time, and the entire vocabulary of her pain suddenly disappears. She breathes heavily in the heat of the tent. The midwives wipe her forehead. A 4th child cries out in the dry air. The blood is washed away. The boy is wrapped in rough woven cloth. Leah holds him. She looks at his face, but this time, she does not look at the door. She does not wait for Jacob to walk in. She does not bargain with her fertility. She stops looking at the man in her tent. She looks at the God in her sky. In Genesis chapter 29, verse 35, the narrative shifts entirely. Leah says, "This time I will praise the Lord." And she names him Judah. The word for praise here is the Hebrew verb yada. It appears over 100 times in the Old Testament. Its root does not actually mean to sing. What he whispers in this dim room will shape thousands of years of human history. The words that leave his cracked lips. It does not mean to feel joyful. The literal, physical origin of yada is to throw, to cast, or to shoot an arrow. Over time, the word evolved to mean extending the hands, throwing your empty hands forward in surrender, in confession, or in desperate gratitude. It is the same exact word King David uses centuries later in Psalm 138 when he bows toward the temple and says, "I will give you thanks." He is throwing his hands forward. He is yielding. That root changes everything about this birth. When Leah names her son Judah, she is not writing a happy melody. She is dropping her weapons. She is throwing her hands up in the middle of a relational war zone. She is taking the heavy, agonizing idol of her husband's affection and casting it away. Praise is not the byproduct of getting what you want. It is the weapon you wield when you finally stop fighting for it. Judah becomes the pivot point of the entire biblical story. Because God does not choose the firstborn. He does not choose the son of seeing. He does not choose the son of hearing. He does not choose the son of joining. He chooses the son of surrender. It is through the bloodline of Judah that the kings will come. David will wear the crown of Judah. Solomon will build the temple from the wealth of Judah, will draw the borders of nations, dictate the flow of ancient wars, and eventually frame the gates of the eternal city. And centuries later, a carpenter from Nazareth will step out of the woodshop, born directly from the tribe of Judah. The Messiah does not come from the favored wife. He comes from the unloved woman who finally learned how to throw her hands in the air. But Leah is not the only woman in this camp. Across the clearing, another tent flap opens, and Rachel is watching. We tend to skip over the middle sons of Jacob: Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, and Zebulun. When we read their names in the biblical record, we treat them like filler material in a dusty historical ledger. We read them rapidly, assuming they are just the necessary bureaucratic padding required to reach the sacred number 12. But when you analyze the sociology of Genesis chapter 30, a much darker reality emerges. This is not a story about family planning. This is a proxy war. Rachel, suffocating under the weight of her own barrenness, takes her servant Bilhah and pushes her into Jacob's tent. Leah, terrified that her sister might close the gap, retaliates by weaponizing her own servant. Zilpah, they are treating the flesh and blood of surrogate women like artillery in a domestic arms race. Most people read the list of the 12 tribes of Israel like a dusty table of contents, a roster of ancient factions, and the names they assign to these boys track the bitter, escalating psychology of the women who claimed them. Rachel names Dan, meaning God has judged me. She names Naphtali, meaning, with great wrestlings I have wrestled my sister, and I have won. Leah counters with Gad, meaning a troop comes, and Asher, meaning happy. She even buys a single night with her own husband, using a handful of freshly pulled mandrake roots, and she names the resulting son Issachar, meaning wages. So the women continue to trade human lives. These names are not joyful birth announcements. They are scorecards. They are the calculated milestones of a rivalry, permanently carved into the identities of 6 boys who would grow up knowing exactly why they were conceived. You can almost feel the tension in the camp, the cold stares across the cooking fires, the heavy silence of the surrogate mothers, the children growing up as pawns in a game they did not choose to play. Yet, the theological implication here is staggering. God does not wait for this family to clean up their act. He does not demand moral perfection before he begins his work of building a kingdom. He takes the messy, bruised, morally compromised results of their proxy war and writes them into the foundation of his covenant. He uses the collateral damage, a Bronze Age genealogical tree. We assume these names are just identifiers. We think they are simply the biological ancestors of a nation. But the proxy war eventually exhausts itself. The surrogates stop bearing children. The shouting in the camp finally dies down. And in the barren silence that follows, Rachel finally conceives a son of her blood. The name she gives him will push the family past the breaking point. And it will eventually save the known world from starvation. The dust of the tent floor is swept clean. After years of agonizing silence, after watching Leah give birth 6 times, after watching the surrogate women produce 4 boys, Rachel finally holds a son of her own. You can imagine the heavy, wet weight of the child resting against her chest. You can hear the uneven catch in her breath. The favored wife, the one Jacob actually wanted, has finally provided an heir. Most people assume this is the moment she finally finds peace. We assume she exhales, pulls hair boy, and rests in the quiet satisfaction of a closed chapter. But if you listen to the words she actually speaks in the delivery room, you realize she is not resting at all. Genesis chapter 30, verse 24 records her exact declaration. She looks at the child. She names him, and she says, "May the Lord add to me another son." A bureaucratic way to keep track of who gets what piece of land in the Middle East. But if you look closer, the name we read in English is Joseph. The word she speaks in Hebrew is Yosef. It comes directly from the root verb yasaf. It means to add, to increase, to exceed the current boundaries. When the Old Testament writers want to describe God, adding 15 years to King Hezekiah's life, they use Yasaf. When they describe the multiplication of a harvest, they use Yasaf. It is a word of exponential expansion. That root changes the entire tone of the moment. When Rachel names Joseph, she is not writing a conclusion. She is writing a conjunction. Joseph is not a monument to what happened. He is a prophecy of what is coming. And the destiny encoded in his name will literally keep this entire family from going extinct. Decades later, when the proxy war in the camp turns violent, when the brothers throw this favored son into a dry well and sell him into Egyptian slavery, they think they are subtracting him from the family. They think they are erasing the father's favorite. But God is doing exactly what Rachel prophesied. God is adding. Joseph goes to Egypt. He rises from a prison cell to the right hand of Pharaoh. And when a global famine sweeps across the ancient Near East, pulling Jacob and the brothers towards starvation, Joseph opens the storehouses. He fills their empty grain sacks. He adds years to their lives.